All right, in project 3, we're going to do a flower pendant. We're going to start off with a sketch. That sketch is going to be in the OXY plane. That's the default plane. Just click sketch. And we need 2 NURBS curves. These are going to be the paths for our sweeping. So I'll start with a regular NURBS curve. And right about in the middle of the top of the plane here, I'm going to start my first click, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, about 5 points will be plenty. We can shape this. For the other side, we use a separate NURBS curve. So go ahead and click a new NURBS curve, and we're going to link that point to the top of the other curve. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as well. Okay. So we'll go ahead and shape it. Once you have it drawn, remember you can always edit your curves and play around with the shapes. Next, we need a section to sweep along those paths. For that, I'm going to use a symmetrical vertical curve plane. So go ahead and click on that, and it's going to be 6 points. And watch closely. It's 1, 2, 3 going up, and then 4, 5, 6 going down to make a shape something like that. Remember, you can always edit it if you don't get it right the first time. That's all the sketches we need. Go ahead and exit the sketch. Back in the solid mode, we're going to pre-select our 2 paths. So click the first side, and then Control or Command select the second side. And then curve sweeping. It's in the construct section. Okay, so the first tab, we've already filled out our paths, number 1 and number 2. We're going to use auto orientation and rebuild curves to 50 points. Go ahead to the second tab, and we need to choose the curve for our section. So click the hand, grab the curve. The position is automatically 0 for your first selection, so we'll leave that alone since we only have 1 section to add. Go ahead to the third tab, and if your section is upside down, you may have to flip it over, go to Effect, and do 180 degrees. That just depends on which order you selected things or which direction you drew them. So just visually check that and rotate it 180 if you need to. The alignments will leave all the same. If you go ahead and validate, I want to point out one thing. If you look at the tip of the flower, as it comes to a point, these 2 paths come to a point, this section gets squished on top of itself. Looks a little funny. A little trick you can do whenever you're doing multiple path sweeps. On the third tab as well, double click back into the flower petal. The third tab, there's a scale on height option. Click on that. It's going to scale these sections smaller and smaller and smaller all the way to a point. If you validate that, it's going to look much better. Okay, so we've got our first petal. Before we circular duplicate it, if we circular duplicate it now, it's going to be a mess in the center all on top of each other. And that's because we have it right in the center of the screen. So let's go ahead and add a move, rotate, scale to this flower petal first. So select the petal, click on move, rotate, scale in the position section. And I'll go to a top view and just move it slightly up away from that center line. So just like that. Go ahead and validate that. And also, before we circular duplicate it, it's much easier if we add tools now instead of having to go back and add them later. So I also want to bend this petal a little bit. So if I go ahead and click on the petal and then bend, this is a regular bend in the deform section. Okay. The direction I'm bending it in is going to be along the green at the tip of the petal. So go ahead and click that one time, and that'll open up the slider. So now we can grab that slider and bend it a little bit. Go ahead and validate that. Now we'll do our circular duplication, and then we'll go back and edit any of these that we need to, since we've already added those steps to the history. So select the petal, click on circular duplication, that's in the duplicate section. And default is 10 petals, 360 degrees all the way around. So all that looks good, except for 10 is too many. It's still overlapping quite a bit. It looks funny. I think 6 petals for this one will be okay. We'll go ahead and check that out, and if it looks good, validate. Now, before we move on, we want to fix some little problems here. It doesn't quite blend together where they're touching here. So we can go ahead and adjust that move that we did earlier. maybe pulling them up just a little bit will make them cleaner. So if we expand our circular duplication, that's the last thing we did, and then also expand the bend, go all the way back to that move, rotate, scale we just started earlier. Double click it and just make a fine tune adjustment, validate, recompute. So that's getting better. Another way you can adjust this is maybe my petals are too wide to fit this number of petals around. So if I double click back into the sketch that I created those curves on, we can go ahead and edit that. If I go ahead and just maybe bring these a little bit closer together so they start to blend nicer, just keep recomputing as you go and you can check to see how they blend. That looks much better, nice and even. Let's go ahead and exit out of that sketch once you've made your adjustments. So looking good. Next, we're going to create the center of the flower. I'm going to go ahead and draw a sphere right in the center of the OXY plane. So that's the first solid figure. And click and drag to create the sphere. And then go ahead and center it perfectly by clicking the centering button. You should have 0, 0, 0 in the X, Y, and Z. And the radius or the diameter will just depend on the hole that you're trying to cover up here. So you can make adjustments there. It depends on how you want it to look. Validate that, and it looks okay. It just looks like a sphere stuck in the middle of a flower, so what we're going to do is squish that into a better shape. So go ahead and select that sphere, and then we'll add a move, rotate, scale to it. So under position, move, rotate, scale, and we'll start by scaling it. So you have your 3 shortcuts here, or you can go to scale over here. Either way works. It's the 3rd tab. And if you turn off keep ratio, we can scale it in X, Y, or Z independently of each other. So turn off the keep ratio and just grab this top arrow. That'll be scaling it in the Z direction. So it squishes down a bit. From a front view, we see it's still sticking out of the back a little too much. So go ahead and switch back to the move tab and just grab it and slightly bring it up. You want to keep close attention that you don't bring it so much that you can see a gap between your petals and the back of it. So you can kind of move it up and down, get it just a nice overlap so it's just barely sticking out of the back. That looks great. Go ahead and validate. Okay. Finally, we'll go ahead and add it all together. Select your group of petals. This is a group because you can see there is the white boxes around each individual petal. Anytime you move or duplicate something more than one object at a time, it automatically groups it for you. So it still needs to be Boolean together, but we'll go ahead and Boolean it all together with the center of the flower as well. So select everything, all the metals, and in the special effects section, we'll go to Boolean operations. We're adding them together, so add is the default. Check my list here, make sure I have everything selected properly, and just validate. Now when you select or hover over it, you see that it's all one object because none of those white boxes show up anymore, and it selects as one object, Boolean. Okay. So to finish up this project, we're just going to add a couple of library parts to it for rendering purposes. I'm going to go ahead and clean up this file a little bit. We'll hide all my sketches, and we'll hide, that's it for now. We might still need the planes for a second here. Go ahead and pull up your library from the bottom, and we're going to start with necklace bales and choose the one you like. There's some pre-mades in here. Later on, once you learn a little bit more about sweeping, you can make your own bales. I'm going to use this open V here. Just double click it, close the library back down. We can go ahead and start to move it into position using the transform tool built in here. So we'll get it to right about there and then validate that. Now we still may need to rotate and scale and move it some more, so we'll select that imported element, the bale, and click on move, rotate, scale. First thing I'm going to do is flip it over. Go to the rotate tab and grab just one of the directions. This will be the Y, and start flipping it, and then just type in 180. So get it started and then flip it the rest of the way using the degrees for the angle. Okay, it also needs to be rotated just a bit to match the surface that I'm putting it on, so I'll go ahead and rotate it like that. And then I also see I need to move it a little bit more, so I'll switch back to move, grab it and move it up so it sinks into that flower, something like that. Again, it's just for rendering purpose at this point. We're not going to attach it. You could attach it if you want to use that exact bale. But since I'm just going to render it in there, we'll just go ahead and move it into a nice position. It doesn't have to be perfect. And we'll do the same thing for the actual chain of the necklace. So go ahead and pull up the library again, and then under the chain section, there's a few pre-mades. Again, later we'll learn how to make your own chains. And I'm going to use the rope for this one. I like the chain. So we'll close the library back down, and same thing, we go ahead and move it into position. Go ahead and check your different views. Because this is up higher now, I may have to move it in that direction as well. And again, you just want to make it look like it's hanging from the chain, like so. Validate that. And that's it for this project. You can go ahead and render it out using the built-in render, using templates, or if you've learned how, you can set up your own rendering lab. If you have Deep Image plugin, you can go ahead and render it with Deep Image. Either way, you want to select all your objects and then click the either rendering option. So that's it. We'll see you in the next project.